We've talked about many alien races on this channel before, from fan favourites like the Twi'leks to races we all love to hate like the Neimoidians. Throughout the history of the galaxy's conflicts, but especially during the Clone Wars, many alien races seemed to clash with the Republic. Some species, like the Neimoidians, made it seem inevitable due to their innate personalities. Others just had a lot of history behind their decision, and some, like the Aqualish, had both. In today's video, we'll be looking at these barbaric, amphibious arachnoids to see why they were so trigger happy and what made them become separatists before it was cool.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
The Aqualish were a species of sentient humanoid amphibians native to the planet of Ando. There were three distinct Aqualish races, the Aquala, the Ualak, and the Quara. But they weren't genetically differentiated enough to count as an entirely different species. The Aquala were the most numerous of the three and made up 90% of all Aqualish. They were seen as the baseline breed and had two black eyes and finned hands. Due to their lack of actual fingers, they were unable to operate most machinery, and so they spent most of their lives in the swamps of their homeworld. The Quara had evolved clawed, 5-fingered hands, and also had 2 eyes. Finally, the Ualak were considered products of genetic mutation. This subrace had 4 eyes instead of 2, and hands that could either have 3 or 5 fingers. They were the least accepted of the 3 sub-races, and often left their homeworld to avoid discrimination by their close cousins. Regardless of their subrace, the common characteristic traits all Aqualish shared were their glossy black eyes, the large tusks that curved down their chins, and the fur that grew on various parts of their body. In case you think you're imagining it, yep, the Aqualish looked like spider people and actually had arachnid DNA in their genetic makeup. They were actually distant relatives of the Harch, another arachnid species found in the galaxy. Honestly, we're not quite sure how to feel about that. All Aqualish grew fur on the sides of their head but never at the top, and on some individuals, fur also grew on their hands. The top of their heads, however, was as bald as a boiled egg. Their tusks were very sensitive to extreme temperatures. They were used to crack open the shells of mussels and shellfish, or to help them burrow into the loamy soil of their homeworld. There's no sources that the Aqualish used their tusks to inject venom into unsuspecting victims, but we're still a bit sus. Another thing all Aqualish were known for was their fiery tempers. They were famous for their intense and passionate rages that seemed to be more easily triggered than even a Wookiee's. Their culture revolved around toughness and aggression, with the Quara in particular having a reputation for being brute thugs. Most of the Aqualish who ventured off-world ended up pursuing more unsavory careers, such as mercenaries, bounty hunters, or pirates. This intolerance wasn't just aimed at strangers, however. Each subrace pretty much hated the other two, convinced they were the superior version of their species. This, as you can imagine, played an important role in Aqualish history. The Aqualish liked their early history just how they liked their merrymaking. Violent. If you recall, we explained that the 3 subraces hated each other with a passion. What we didn't mention is that in the early days, they lived in different ecosystems on their home planet. The Aquala lived in the waters of Ando's oceans, the Quara lived in the planet's wetlands, and the Ualak inhabited the dark caves and rainforests. It wasn't just their superiority complexes that made them fight. Remember how we mentioned that Ualak were considered genetic mutations? The other 2 subraces were pretty heavily prejudiced against them, going so far as to blame them for a decline in fishing yields. That sort of hostile climate could only balance for so long before war broke out. And it did. Violently. 15,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, the Aqualish Civil War ignited the sparks of hatred. Spider-Person turned on Spider-Person, and it was an all-out fight to exterminate the other subraces. They were doing a pretty good job of it too, but their violent free-for-all ended in a surprising peace treaty that unified all 3 races. Did they realize they were more similar than dissimilar? Did they learn to put their differences aside and live in harmony? Nah, they just found someone they hated more than each other. In 15,000 BBY, the same year the Civil War broke out, an exploratory craft from either Corellia or Duro made planetfall on Ando. This was the Aqualish's first contact with Offworlders, and to say they didn't get along was an understatement. Once their Offworld visitors were swimming with the fishes, the Aqualish, united in the face of a galaxy they realized was teeming with people they could pick a fight with, took to picking apart the spacecraft until they figured out hyperdrive travel. Armed with this new technology, the Aqualish took to the stars in search of new worlds they could bully. Their first target was a neighboring planet named Ando, which went from peacefully minding its own business to burning to the ground once the Aqualish were done with it. At this point, we're still in 15,000 BBY. During the Great Manifest period, envoys from the Republic made contact with the fishy folk on Ando. As anyone could guess, the Aqualish were absolutely not having this, and another war broke out, the aptly named Aqualish Republic War. Naturally, the barbaric denizens of Ando had no hope of beating the much more fortified Republic, who claimed victory in this brief conflict. Defeated, the Aqualish joined the Republic. This alliance did not last forever. Even as members of the Republic with representatives in the Senate, the Aqualish didn't rest on their laurels. Instead, they launched a campaign of space colonization that culminated in the formation of the Andoan Free Colonies, a union of 15 planets in the Lambda sector of the Mid-Rim that was established around 102 BBY. These planets all fell victim to the Aqualish's violent ways, which should be enough of a hint for anyone to realize that, once again, a war would break out. In 57 BBY, the Free Colonies rebelled against their Andoan Aqualish overlords and the Andoan Wars began. This conflict was brutal, quickly resulting in a loss for the rebelling colonies. Before the Aqualish could brutalize their rebelling subjects, however, the Galactic Republic intervened and enforced demilitarization in the sector to spare more lives. This, as you can imagine, was not well received by the Aqualish. Aqualish resentment for the Republic had been simmering for millennia, ever since the Republic defeated them in their first war, and after the Horror Spine incident, as the forced demilitarization event came to be known as, it became the final nail in the coffin. In 23 BBY, just before the Clone Wars broke out, Ando was the first planet to secede from the Republic alongside Mirth, a former Republic world in the Outer Rim. Po Nudo, Ando's representative in the Senate, announced the secession, which the Andoan Free Colonies contested bitterly under the leadership of their own senator, Gorathin Vaga. The result was that, while Ando seceded and became an independent world, the Andoan colonies remained part of the Republic. This started an Aqualish migration on both sides, as Aqualish moved between the colonies and Ando depending on their political beliefs. When the Separatist crisis started and the Clone Wars began, Po Nudo, the former Aqualish senator, became a prominent Separatist and held a seat on the Separatist Council. A civil war broke out among the Aqualish once more, now between Nudo's Separatist movement and Vaga's Loyalist movement. Despite Republican Jedi support for the colonies, the conflict ended in a Separatist victory. Later on, after the foundation of the Galactic Empire, Ando would suffer greatly under Imperial rule. Makes you wonder if it was enough to make them miss the Republic. And there you have it. Millennia of violence being suppressed by the Republic led the Aqualish to turn on them the moment they could. Really, we're not surprised they sided with the Separatists. Some people just want to watch the world burn. Do you think the Republic was responsible for Ando's secession? Are there any other worlds you'd like us to cover? Let us know in the comment section below, and as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.